Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us. It's wonderful to know that you're all here and to connect. And thank you for taking time to join us. Um, I'm a settler here in the homelands of the Massachusetts tribe, neighbor to the Wampanoag tribe, Nipmuc band. This simple acknowledgement does not undo or repair the damage done by 400 years of colonization in Massachusetts, place of the Blue Hills. It does not move me from being an occupier to being a good neighbor. It does not return the land to Massachusetts, Wampanoag, and Nipmuc people to care for it and sustain all of us. And these words do not make me a good neighbor, though I aspire to be, to all Indigenous nations and peoples here in the Dawnland region, aka New England. I also want to acknowledge the welcome presence of citizens and members of neighboring Indigenous nations and others that I have omitted. And with that, now I want to welcome in our esteemed moderator for this evening, Bruce Duthu. And he'll be joining me on the screen in just a moment. And really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have together with Bruce and with Mishy Lesser. Um, Bruce is the Bruce is an incredible collaborator of ours who I'm going to ask my colleague Laura if she can bring Bruce into the room with us along with Mishy, and just looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. And Bruce, I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself. But I just was looking back, and as we're celebrating 15 years of Upstander Project, noticing that that first email that I sent you all the way back in 2013, and I'm so glad that you responded and that you were willing to become a producer for Dawnland and willing to join the Upstander Project board. And with that, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself and take us away.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, and thank you all for joining us tonight for this 50th anniversary celebration of Upstander Project and all the wonderful work that has taken place over these few years with incredible film work, teachers' guides, teachers' academies, and so forth. Mishy Lesser, who you'll hear from in just a minute, and Adam and their team have just done some incredible work. I'm beaming in tonight from Abenaki country here in Vermont, just about 5 minutes from the Dartmouth College campus where I teach and I chair Native American and Indigenous Studies. And I'm also an alum of the college, but I'm from the United Homin Nation, tribal nation on the coast of Louisiana. As some of you know, a coast getting smaller and smaller. That is, in terms of my own homelands being in jeopardy of being swallowed up by the Gulf of Mexico, thanks to climate change. As Adam mentioned, my involvement with Upstander began about a decade ago, just over a decade ago, when Adam reached out to chat about the beginning of what became Dawnland, a beautiful film, powerful film. And it's been a wonderful collaboration. But tonight, we're going to be going behind the scenes. This will be our opportunity to kind of go back to the beginning and have Mishy and Adam talk to us about the early days. And since you're joining us for this celebration, this will sound like a PBS promo here, but we rely really on the goodwill and contributions of viewers and listeners like you. And so we also hope you'll take this opportunity, this celebration of the 50th anniversary of the founding of Upstander, to consider contributing to the organization, to continue supporting the great work and more films that are in the pipeline coming out in the near future. So tonight's program is really taking us back in time to look at the origin story and how things might not have come to pass given the early start. So Mishy and Adam, I'd like you to take us back to one of your first films, the first film, Coexist, which we saw the trailer for just a few moments ago. And I understand that there were times when you considered throwing in the towel, that this might not have materialized. So can you share with our viewers tonight what those early days were like? What were the challenges that you encountered, and how did you overcome them?
Um, I'll just introduce myself briefly and then I'll toss it back to you, Adam. Many of those who are here this evening know me, so I don't really need to introduce myself to you, your dear friends and collaborators and family. But for those who I've not had the pleasure of meeting, I am speaking to you from the homeland of the Pequasit Band of the Massachusetts people, present day Watertown. And Adam and I co-founded Upstander 15 years ago. I'm the organization's learning director, and I think recently I was named the president, but that's probably for legal reasons, so it doesn't mean anything. But I am very happy to work with a team in our learning um, group, and my background is Ashkenazi Jewish, and I'll share with you a little bit later how my life, both here but also in other parts of the world, have shaped the path that led me to be here this evening. So, Adam, do you want to talk a little bit about coexist and how we stepped into that?
Thank you, Mishy. Yeah, and I guess I realize I should probably introduce myself a little bit too. For those who may not know me, happy to get to meet you. As I mentioned, I'm in Massachusetts territory, just across the river from where Mishy is, and all of my ancestors are Ashkenazi Jewish, and um, I've been a father and a filmmaker for quite a few years now. I guess a filmmaker longer than a father. And I also like to do hot yoga and weightlifting and cooking when I'm not working on making films. And sometimes even while I'm thinking about films, working on making films, that's happening as well. And Mishy, I have a feeling folks are wondering by now what this lovely picture is and what that has to do with us almost throwing in the towel many years ago. I wonder if you're willing to elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, sure, Adam. It really does take me back. So people will hear probably a little bit later how it was that we came to make Coexist and that I wrote the teacher's guide to accompany the film. Um, we had a great sense of promise with both of those resources, and yet we felt like our work was episodic, that we were invited to a school, then another school, but we weren't really able to have what in those days we referred to as impact. And so we kept trying to find a way to um, connect with broader groups of educators. And we had decided early on, even before Adam made his second trip to Rwanda, that before we were really before we were an organization, that focusing on teachers would have the greatest multiplier effect. And so um, we put out a call. um, I think it was through the Teaching Tolerance platform. So Learning for Justice is what it's called today, but Teaching Tolerance was an organization that we greatly admired that was doing profoundly important work in the education space around race and racism and inequity in our country. And we tried to get their attention because coexist, there are a lot of ways to describe it. But one way is that it's a film about forgiveness, the limitations and the promises of forgiveness. And so they put a tiny little notice in their newsletter saying something like, who or what are you willing to forgive this week? And it popped into a mention of the film. And through that, we were able to go from what felt like a very frustrating moment, like we weren't sure that we were going to be able to sustain ourselves. And then we started getting invitations from schools. And then Adam had this crazy, wonderful idea that we should just offer to send me anywhere that a school would host me. And I mean, anywhere. And so we got invitations from San Diego and from a middle school called Del Dios Middle School in Escondido, California, and places in Oregon. And I just went on the road with our film, with the teacher's guide, and with a sense of how to turn teachers on and with them to reach their students. It was kind of wild. I slept on people's couches and oh my goodness, there were some weird adventures I'm not going to talk about. But fundamentally, what it did was it gave us an affirmation that the documentary connected with teachers and with students from middle school through high school. And I think it sort of changed the dynamic for us. It recalibrated us, and it told us to press up forward, to keep going. Um, Anything you want to share from? I know I was like texting you and emailing you, Adam, from the road, especially with the mishaps. But anything you recall from those days?
Oh, just thinking of how generous it was of me to offer up your time and energy to go travel across the country to teach about the film. Um, uh, there are some adjectives that come to mind, but I'm not sure if and many of them are very flattering about that effort. But I guess um, there was there was hopefully some good-heartedness behind it of trying to get these stories out there and create opportunities for kids to connect and learn. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Mhm.
Let me ask a question about filmmaker positionality in regard to the making of Coexist. And I think this is a question we might hear again in relation to Dawnland. This is a topic that we hear in different contexts, writers writing about issues from which they're not from that community, they're telling the story about another community. So as filmmakers, what were your thoughts about making a film centered around communities in a foreign country, in Rwanda? And what does that say about your positionality as a filmmaker looking back 15 years from that vantage point?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And so we have the luxury of documentation. So I was digging through some of our archives and thinking, okay, well, how can we answer this? How can I answer this question about what my mindset 15 years ago? Well, how about from a video that we made almost 15 years ago, where I basically said what my mindset was. So we actually want to show a little bit of that to you, and then I will be happy to share a little bit more about after that. Laura, could you roll the video, please? I'm Adam Mazo. I'm the director and executive producer of Coexist. This is the first documentary film that I'm making as a professional filmmaker. This is an unusual thing to do for me. I'm a trained journalist. I still like to say I'm a documentary filmmaking journalist. What do you prefer?
Yeah, for what?
French or English?
Yeah,
What?
English.
It's easier.
Yeah, it is
The idea of making Coexist began certainly the first time I was in Rwanda in 2006, and then kind of grew as I continued to work in the television news industry. When I was thinking, there's a lot more there with these stories. A lot of people ask, as we've gone through the process of screening the film, how did you get people to open up? And I think a lot of it was we went to the workshops. They knew that we saw the work that they were doing to try to reconcile, and that helped them understand that we cared about what they were going through. Yes. Wow. My thoughts from about 15 years ago. So yeah, I feel differently than I did then. Um, I think, I mean, there's so much there, right? I mean, and I have tremendous privilege, white privilege, male privilege, that situated me to be able to take risks to make the film, and also that made it so that I even thought that it was a thing that I should do. um, I would not make that film today. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to make it, and I'm glad for the impact that it's had. And I don't think that, if somebody
Mm.
was going to try to make that film today, that it should be me. If somebody wanted me to help, I think maybe talk more later about the ways that we're trying to do things differently, than we did then. Um, as you heard me say in that video, I it was really on a whim that I went there the first time. I didn't have a connection to the place. I was dating somebody who did, and that's how I ended up going and doing some stories for the local television news station I was working for, and that inspired. Sorry about that noise. That inspired. That trip did inspire me to want to do more, to want to, really dig into it further. And I think there is a piece there that we've heard our colleague Claude Gatabuke talk about, that, and that I think we experience with Donland too, that sometimes there are stories that, outsiders, that people are more willing to share with outsiders than they are with insiders. And I don't know if that's what happened with Coexist. I think maybe there was some of that, that maybe people felt more comfortable sharing, knowing that the stories were primarily for an audience that was not there in Rwanda, but that was more here in the US and other places. Um, and at the same time, I was a young, inexperienced documentarian. I had some experience in journalism, but I could argue that I had no right to make that film and no right to tell that story. Sure, I had permission and consent, and that's something, but we didn't go through a lengthy process of talking with people about, all of the things that being in the movie would entail. That we certainly did talk to people about that, but it was, not like what we're doing today. So I think there's, a lot to learn there, and a lot that we're trying to do differently, from those experiences. And, um, yeah, I think that yeah,
Mm.
leave it there.
Sorry, Mishy, could you offer some your thoughts on this question?
Well, Adam's opening line to me was, he tapped me on the shoulder a little over 15 years ago and said, I'm an aspiring documentarian and I'm about to go to Rwanda and I think I need to speak with you. And I was um, I was quite intrigued by the fact that he was already thinking beyond film. He was thinking more holistically about how a film, as a part of sort of an educational strategy, could have impact. And I agree that we would not make this film today, we would not be the leads on it. And yet, I will say, from an educator standpoint, because so much of our work for the last decade has focused on genocide against the original peoples of these homelands where we live, it's so helpful to students and teachers to also introduce them to a contemporary genocide. And to have a partner like Claude Gatabuke, who is a genocide survivor and author, co-author of a book called Survivors Uncensored, bring that depth of insight that he has, uh, as well as his personal story, into classrooms. So we were screening Coexist at a high school in Massachusetts. And after Claude spoke, there was a student who, according to their teacher, had been tremendously disengaged all year, a student who has a lot on their shoulders, who has a sibling who's incarcerated, And that student came to life after seeing the film and listening to Claude's story. And they asked Claude, how do you go on? How have you managed, from what you just told us, to be with us today, teaching us? And he responded, you are part of my healing. And then the student at the end of the workshop, when we asked everybody how they were feeling, the student said, I feel centered. And the teacher was astonished. So I'm not trying to justify the way we made the film, whether we should have been the people to do it. And certainly Rwanda is a very complicated place today. And perhaps the people who gave us permissions, that many years ago would not be happy that the film is still being watched. And yet, the film is having ripples in the pond in very positive ways.
On that,
And
Mishy, you sort of anticipate another question about looking at today's state of division and polarization in this country. And for both of you, as you think about film and filmmaking, I would say that there's a sense that in all of your films, you tend to take, or the films tend to take the long view. That is, that you are, it seems, consciously thinking about the shelf life of these films and to make sure that there are messages that will resonate in.
oh, Bruce, we lost you for a moment there.
I think Bruce froze, but I
Oh,
think,
Oh, there we go, Bruce. You're back.
sorry
yeah,
about that. But if you could kind of elaborate on that
yeah.
sense of the long view and adding some currency, even a sense of urgency to some of the work that you've done, including Coexist.
Mm.
Yeah,
And Mishy, can I jump in for just a second? I want to jump in because I failed to give credit. With you know, when we made Coexist, there were a lot of people who were there, and who are still there, who without whom the film would not have happened, wouldn't have been possible. I remember when I arrived there, and one of the interpreters we were going to work with said, "Do you want to know what's really happening here?" And I said, "Of course, absolutely." And she showed us, and that's what came from the film. And they did not want to be credited by name, and I regret that we did not. It's mentioned in the credits, it's there, but I wish that we would have more prominently credited them, even if it wasn't with their names, just to let folks know how integral they were to making the film, because it wouldn't have happened without those people. And I remember them, and I literally have like, this is my expense sheet from Rwanda, that like has their names on there, and I dug up that I still have, and it's, in Rwandan francs, 20,000 for a hotel, 20,000 to one interpreter. So I remember them, and they are important, and they matter, and without them the film doesn't happen.
so glad you brought them into this conversation, because their contributions need to be honored. I think one of the one of the ways that Adam and I have worked from the very beginning, and maybe it's because we're both strong, we're both headstrong, and Adam's become, a seasoned documentarian over these 15 years. And I think, become a better teacher of teachers and others, because we don't just work with educators anymore. But from the very beginning, when we came together, we decided we wanted to co create. So we weren't going to make a film and then come in and start thinking about a guide for teachers. We were going to, when Adam returned from Rwanda with all of that footage, I think we went through 17 rough cuts. And part of that was trying to refine the message and forcing ourselves to answer the question, what can teachers and students get from this? What is it that might be of universal value that would obviously increase the shelf life, um, of a film or a teacher's guide? And so I know this is a terminology Adam's not wild about, but I think of it as a co-gestational process that we have embarked upon, because it's not how it's usually done. Usually filmmakers do their films and then they try to find an education consultant who can write a viewer's guide or a teacher's guide. We've kind of we took a different tack. And what takes my breath away, whether it's with Coexist or Dawnland, and I know we're going to shift at some point to that, is how those films continue to cause ripples in the pond, and how we try to make sure that those ripples happen inside systems that are seemingly intractable or very slow to change, so that we can be part of that process, even if it's a millimeter, even if it's one person shifting their mental map at a time. Yeah.
Thank you. Adam, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and Mishy, I wonder if you have more to say about it too, about the other part of Bruce's question about kind of the division and polarization, and how the work can be relevant and urgent, looking back at history. Because it's, for
Yeah.
me, I'll say a little bit, pass it over to you, that uh, I feel that mixture. I feel that mixture. I mean, literally today, our colleague Ben Pender Cudlip, who maybe, if we're lucky, will join us later. We were filming, and I was talking about that tension between the urgency of now and the reality of the slowness of the pace of our work and making films, and how do we wrestle with that? And I don't have any good answers, but I know that there's so much in history, in the history that we're documenting, and the stories that we're documenting, that it keeps resonating today. It resonates in new ways when we look at a film that's 5 or 10 years old, and it's of course not just our films, but there are all sorts of films and books and works of art that are like that. And Mishy, I'm going to stop rambling because you were just telling me the other day about this, so please.
When we started to open up these topics, right, with Rwanda, it was post genocide Rwanda. With the original peoples of this land, it's genocide is still happening. So we're talking about hundreds of years of different kinds of atrocities and different forms of genocidal assault. And what we've attempted to do was link this work and find tools that would allow us to link this work to the lives of children in ways that are relevant, in ways that will grip them. And we actually tried to go down the route of what is referred to as social and emotional learning, which is a lot about trying to help children learn positive behaviors, because some of the models with which we teach about genocide really put an emphasis on individual choice. Like, I can decide whether I classify people into us or them. I can decide what words I use. I can decide if I use symbols to degrade people. I can decide if I dehumanize in my peer groups. And what we attempted to do was the very slow, below the radar work of linking these big moments in history to certain kind of skill building of social and emotional intelligence. And we have found that even if the social and emotional learning world didn't really see it as a good fit, we have found that students really are eager to talk about who gets othered in their classroom, in their school, and what they can do to prevent that. And in some ways, that is using these films to try to foster a different quality of interaction, of listening, of engagement, of curiosity than what prevails in our society right now, where people are diminishing, demeaning, name calling, where the power of unbridled greed and narcissism are being broadcast in very large ways, and we are quietly trying to help not just students but also teachers, because they feel like they're very much under attack right now in so many states, to develop a certain kind of musculature that can hold these complicated, conflicted realities, so that we can find a different way forward than the path that seemingly we as a country are on.
Thanks, Mishy, for that thoughtful. I want to take a moment here to, we're going to transition to a question about Dawnland, or to Dawnland, but I've got one more question about coexist. But I want to urge our viewers, or listeners and viewers tonight, to, if they have questions, to please put them in the chat. Our team waiting in the wings are going to be compiling them, and towards the end we'll have some Q&A, and we'll take a few questions from all of you. But one question before we'll transition to talking about Dawnland and hearing from Ben. Mishy and Adam, part of what you were saying in your responses talks about not just the making of the film, but also creating a sense of legitimacy for your production company, for Upstander, whose anniversary we're celebrating tonight. How do you establish legitimacy for the organization? Can you talk a bit about that focus?
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. How do we establish legitimacy? If we figure it out, we'll get back to you. Um, uh, so, I mean, let's go back to the documentation. We were thinking about this and did find relatively, now we'll see how enduring this kind of marketing video is that we made. We figured we would show it to you so that you can see one of the ways we were trying to establish legitimacy. And Laura, if you can roll the video, we'll see what it looks like.
Good morning. My name is Mishy Lesser. I'm the learning director of Coexist. This is a documentary that we made about a faraway place called Rwanda, but we also made it about things that happen in our own hearts.
People in America, or the people in the West, they should know that they're not just Africans, but they're human beings just like them. They also bleed red blood. So the world should know that history happened so that we can learn from it. And if it happened in Rwanda, what makes you think it can't happen at home where you are? It might not be you, but your child.
Have a seat anywhere you like. So rather than having that pyramid kind of thing where one person is dominating the discussion, we're all in a circle, so we're all going to be equally contributing.
Like in recess, there's like the main bully who almost brainwashes them. And in Rwanda, there was this main guy, as we saw, the guy sentenced for life, who brainwashed these people to kill. So although it's vastly different between losing your life and maybe like getting your backpack thrown in the trash, you can still compare them.
I'm betting that a majority of the people who actually did killings weren't fundamentally killers, like they didn't enjoy it, but they felt like they were facing a majority of people who were killers, and that the only thing they could do was to join them.
Peer pressure can affect people's thinking. Did Alex make the right decision? Well, that's debatable. He saved his own life, but it was at the cost of harming someone else's.
I feel like genocide would happen anywhere, and there's a chance of it happening in America.
Maybe it could happen here, but I also think that the chance is very small because we have events like what happened in Rwanda to teach us and to force us to look at ourselves and to say, are we fostering the kind of environment that caused this? And it's helping us to try and prevent that from happening.
I think it could happen here, and I think it has happened here. This guy on the $20 bill, President Andrew Jackson, he came up with a plan to move Native Americans, to march Native Americans from Georgia to Oklahoma. Thousands died doing this. And pretty much our history has been to use violence against the natives and move them west. We do divide our society. We do have groups who are considered below other groups, and it wouldn't be very difficult to move people to start using violence against these lesser groups, especially when we have times of economic decline like they had in Rwanda, like they had in Germany. We got to be careful. Use what you learn today and apply it when you are a citizen.
So I have to say, it absolutely takes my breath away to see that clip. Trying to remember what year it was. Perhaps you know, Adam. I feel like there was a prescience, both in the comments of the students and the teachers. I hope I'm not exaggerating here, but we were asked to work with, I think, 400 students in an assembly where we showed coexist. I introduced the film, then we divided everybody up. We did a training of the teachers very quickly in circle process, so that they could actually sit with groups of 20 students in a variety of classrooms and not lecture, but hear the students. And I'm actually so pleased by the insightful comments made by the student who said the majority weren't killers. Well, I know I'm going really fast forward here, but we're going to talk about bounty a little later. And if somebody could remind me to come back to why that comment is relevant, because not all those who scalped were vicious. Based on what we have researched, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole just now. And then the teacher who said it could happen here. It is potentially happening here in terms of, the weakening of democratic institutions, the rule of law, and the greater willingness among some to use violence, intimidation, name calling, packing the courts, gerrymandering to secure the raw power that they want. So I think we've always tried to find or to create space so that students and teachers can find the parallels and to make these histories relevant to their realities. And I'm kind of proud of that little clip and the work that we did. And I'll just say that was Arlington High School. And we are going back to Arlington High School hopefully in a few months with funding from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education under the Genocide Education Law that was passed in December 2021. So it's very exciting. We have an Upstander Academy alumna in that school, and that for us changes everything. And maybe at some point we can talk about what the academy is.
And Mishy, we have a visual example of here of another, because the how we
Continue.
Oh, sorry, Bruce. I think one of us must have dropped out. So sorry if I was interrupting. Yes. So yeah, we have this visual example here of one of the ways we were trying to establish legitimacy. If you want to share a little bit about that too.
Yeah, it was so. We decided, as I said, to focus on educators, and then we decided that history and social studies educators were our people. And there are state and regional, they call them social studies councils, and then there is a national council for the social studies that has thousands of members. And I think it was a really big deal for us when we went to the first big national conference in Seattle, and then made connections to people because we started doing our workshops at these annuals. And we were invited to give a keynote. So you can see in this image, I was getting some kind of a recognition from the president of the Florida Council for the Social Studies. How incredible it is to say Florida. I mean, right now, what we taught there, the keynote that I gave would probably land me in jail. And the educators with whom we engaged, I don't know how they are faring. But the space for being truth tellers has, collapsed in that state. But as Adam was coaxing me to say, it was a great moment for us to be invited to give a keynote there and to feel like we had the legitimacy and the recognition. And I think one way we did it, to the question you posed earlier, Bruce, we figured out which organizations and people do we admire, and can we align ourselves with them? Can we learn from them? Can we learn from their mistakes? And that helped to propel us forward at a moment when we were on the verge of pulling the plug and saying, okay, this is as far as we could get. It was a fine ride, but we're not getting the traction that we need to sustain this.
Thank you. I think you have a few more slides you wanted to show for this before we transition to Dawnland, or
Go ahead, Bruce.
can we bring up Ben? Ben, are you still with us? There he is.
Surprise.
Thank you
Special
very much.
guests.
Cameo. It's great to see Ben again. Ben served as co-director and cinematographer on Dawnland, and you also were cinematographer for Coexist. Is that right?
That's right. No, I wasn't. I came on much later in the process for Coexist. I
Well,
helped with the color. That's right.
It's great to see you again. And we're transitioned from Coexist to Dawnland, the project that all four of us had worked on for quite a few.
So Bruce has frozen again. Maybe Ben, let's just channel where we think Bruce was going with his question.
You got it. So I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm Ben Pendercudlip. I'm of British descent, and I'm coming to you tonight from Massachusetts territory. I'm pretty sure. Oh, there he is. Oh,
Bruce, we see you. Can we hear you?
No, I said I'm wondering why I disappear and keep coming back. It must be a Vermont thing.
We're glad you're back. You want to Ben was starting to introduce himself, but you want to go ahead and pose your question?
Oh, I was just asking.
Okay, Ben, maybe you should continue
You got
your
it.
lovely
Yeah.
introduction.
So happy to be here tonight, and I'm here to share with you a time when we really stepped in it. The picture you're seeing is from a feedback screening we did with our film Dawnland. And when Adam and I were traveling around Maine, working with the TRC and Reach, making the film, we had promised the whole time that we would share the film with the communities that were in it before it went out into the world. We'd share it at a rough cut state and get feedback. And so we took all of our footage. We came back to Boston and we edited. And when we thought the film was pretty good, we gathered together with so many of the folks that are in the film, and it's been related to the filming process, both from the TRC and Reach and community members from all of the Native communities in Maine. And we screened it. And after the film finished, there was silence. And then there was anger. I remember very clearly one of the commissioners saying, if this is your film, I can't support it. And that was a lot for us. We sat for about an hour in circle and listened to some pretty blunt feedback about our missteps in the film. And to sort of really boil them down and distill them, Adam and I had sort of employed what we thought was the right way of making a film, the sort of more slightly journalistic side of the documentary equation, where we intentionally kept a little bit of separation between our filming process and the edit. And the community, and we thought that was the way to do it. And as a result, a lot of our biases crept in, frankly. And on screen, what that translated into was really placing, especially toward the end of the film, some people in the film who were white, and giving them quite a lot more screen time than we really should have, because that's what we thought. That's what we thought the sort of first act, second act, third act structure of the film required. And we, because of that, would sort of minimize the voice of the community. So we took that feedback and we went back to Boston, and we didn't know how we thought we couldn't cut out those scenes and lose important pieces of the film. And lo and behold, after we did, the film was better. And we're incredibly grateful to all the individuals that gave us such direct feedback, because it improved the film, and really helped us refocus on what it needed to represent, which is the voices of the community.
Yeah, and thank you, Ben. That's like, yeah, I mean, it was tense, and like we literally had a photographer in the room because here's our great film and you're gonna love it and let's take some pictures. And as you can see from like, this photo is real. Like, people did not love it, as Ben said. And we really, I mean, I'll speak for myself and not ascribe this to you, Ben, but I think I was lacking in humility and understanding about the power dynamics that were at play. I think, maybe I knew it on a super surface level, but not really understanding the importance of setting expectations about what we were showing, about having more touch points along the way to talk about what we were doing, what we were and were not including in the film. Maybe not doing this big, large group rough cut screening before showing it to really anybody in the room. Because a lot of people in that room, had we showed it to them privately, would have given a similar feedback. But we didn't, we were not, we weren't thinking in that way. We thought, okay, we'll bring it almost to the finish line. And when we think it's good, we'll show it to them and they're going to love it and it'll be great. And it wasn't. And I think that was something, it's a lifelong learning process. Hopefully we're getting better at it, but it's not something that I'm proud of, but I hope that it can be a lesson for other folks about the importance of really involving people in the process throughout, and not just delivering the baked cake, the picture locked film, and expecting people to love it when you haven't gone through that process of co-creating, or at least sharing along the way, really inside the process in a way that we were not, and that I wish that we would have been. And we were sharing it with others on the team, but we were not thinking about. I was thinking in a more colonial, sort of journalistic, traditional way of, we're making a film about these folks, so we can't involve them in the process, and we'll talk to other folks about the film that we're making, because that's how you do documentary and journalism. And thankfully, things didn't get harmed irreparably. We were able to find a path forward, but that's it's really much credit to Mishy, to you, but also to Esther and Sandy and Penthea from Reach and from the commission, who were willing to be patient with us when they didn't have to be. They could have just said, you know what, forget it. Don't put fine, if you want to put the film out, you can. and we won't show up for it. But they didn't do that. They allowed us the space and the time to improve it, and they were willing to sit down with us again and watch it again after we had made changes. And thank goodness their feedback helped, and they saw value in the film going forward. Um, but yeah, it's hopefully a great learning experience.
Yeah, I mean, we are very much in debt to their grace for sticking with it and educating us. And I regret that we put so many people in that position, and that we didn't intend to cause harm, but we did, and sort of have to own that and try and do better next time.
What does doing better look like, based on all those wonderful observations and reflections? But can you give us some examples of how you're trying to do better? You've done other films, and we'll talk about some of them, or we may get questions about that. But can you give us some samples of what doing better looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are very much trying to do that with the project that we're working on right now. It's called We Sing Nonetheless. It's a feature film about a bluegrass band called Nefesh Mountain, and how they're navigating this very fraught moment in the American Jewish community, and how we are navigating it, including all of us here, many of us Jewish, and they're Jewish, and we are taking a really different approach to co-creation and how we're making the film. That's very much inspired by an experience that we had at the Camden Film Festival a couple of years ago, where they screened this really wonderful film called Subject, which folks should watch on Amazon if they can, because it's wonderful. And there was a panel hosted by the Points North Institute and the Documentary Accountability Working Group, talking about this level set framework, which was generously shared with us by this group called Reimagine, and Il Weaver, and attorneys Sekou Campbell and Lori Pendergrast. And I can't say enough about DAW, the Documentary Accountability Working Group, that has inspired us and also built up accountability practices across the industry. And I'm thinking of amazing people who've been really supportive of our work and given great guidance, like Natalie Bullock Brown and Sonia Childress and Molly Murphy and Bawin Suchak and Sherry Simpson. And Ben, wondering if I could toss it to you to talk more about what the level set is and how it's helping us with power dynamics and navigating this film. And of course, you want to say more about the film itself. Yeah, over to you.
Absolutely, yeah. So this framework, the way we've been using it in the production of this film, We Sing Nonetheless, sort of fundamentally looks like a series of guided, facilitated conversations. And in these conversations or level sets, we had one before we started production. We've had a number throughout production, so we regularly revisit it. And you're seeing an image of one of them right now. And it's the prompts for these conversations really help create a shared space of mutual accountability and transparency that has been so critical, not just for trust building, but in truly figuring out how to co-create this project together. And so working through these questions, in fact, many of the same questions each time, which our answers sometimes change over the months. The questions involve things like safety. How do we ensure the safety of participants in the film? Compensation, who gets paid, how, who has final cut. It helps us give. I'm going to take that back, because that's very much a colonial way of thinking about it, right? We're giving power. It's more a rebalancing of power in the documentary space, and sort of like this shared accountability has really helped us navigate some tricky moments in the making of this new project, We Sing Nonetheless, and also helped us really strengthen the project, because we all know what our North Star is and how we're all in our different ways working toward it together, instead of sort of this sort of siloed behavior where the outsiders are making the film, and eventually they show it for feedback, and it's truly much more of a healthy process, and really really pleased with how it's working for us in this film. What would you want to add, Adam?
That was great. Yeah, it's been it's just a completely different experience that I really wish that that framework. I mean, certainly there's plenty of frameworks I imagine like this that have existed over time. It's not the idea of sitting in a circle and talking to each other is not something that was invented a few years ago. I'm aware of that. And that said, this level, I can't say enough about this level set framework because it's made in the context of documentary filmmaking. So it kind of gave us tools for how to talk about this. And I wish that we had that when we started Dawnland. I wish we would have used it and embraced it. I think it would have just made things all that much better and stronger relationships and emphasis on co-creation and just a lot better, better outcomes for everybody.
It sort of forces us to think about the thorny stuff, right? Like the stuff that's really easy to not think about or to say, we'll think about that later, or that probably won't happen. Well, what if it does? And yeah, really grateful to the folks at Dog and Detroit Narrative Agency for helping conceive this.
Thank you all. One of you mentioned coordination and collaboration with the folks at REACH. And I wondered, Mishy, if I could turn to you to talk about, you all learned something about decision-making processes within REACH. Could you share some of that with the viewers tonight and your sense of why ultimately you were all allowed to continue to bear witness and document their processes on film?
Yeah, great question, Bruce. Thank you. Some years back, it was probably a couple years after Dawnland was released, I was in New Jersey. I'm pretty sure Esther Ann and Penthea. I think of them as among, a small circle of godmothers of the Truth and Reconciliation process in Maine with Wabanaki people. We were doing a joint screening and presentation at a college in New Jersey with Dawnland. And Arla Patch, who was also a founding member of REACH, if I'm not mistaken, was there. And we were talking. And she revealed to me what to that point, we didn't know. We knew that there were other people interested in bearing witness to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's process. Some of them interested in making a film. And we didn't really know why they gave us a green light. Adam and Ben traveled to Wabanaki homelands for months before we were really allowed to go forward. And Arla said that they vetted when Adam made that first call after I heard on NPR about the creation of the TRC in Maine. Adam made a call to the people at REACH and introduced himself and then began, what turned out to be, I think, 50,000 miles of trips in the old jalopy to Maine back and forth. And a few months into it, they said, okay, you can make the film. Well, it was because of Coexist and the teacher's guide, and that we had an educator strategy, is what Arla said. We knew that you didn't want to just make a film. We knew that you wanted to find ways to bring that film to larger audiences, to teach about it. And so that's what gave us the confidence to give you the green light to go forward.
And Mishy, I think it was like what we're seeing on the screen, work like this, kind of the early days of the Upstander Academy, that also, really established some legitimacy, I guess, with them, right?
Well, yeah, thank you for reminding me of that, Adam. So I should tell that story now. We were actually invited in like 2014 2014. So that was we learned about the TRC in 2013 and began that journey. 2014, we were invited to UConn School of Education to screen Coexist and to design for them an all-day teachers workshop about genocide and Rwanda. And this was like the 200th time when at the end of a workshop and I asked for feedback, I heard this was so unusual. This was transformational. It was profound and it was way too short. And when I heard way too short, way too many times, um, it felt like a message was coming forth that we needed to create something that we didn't have, that maybe didn't exist. And thus, in 2015, we spent a year planning, and in 2016, in partnership with the University of Connecticut's Dodd Research Center and the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center, we launched the Upstander Academy. And we piloted for 3 years in Connecticut. And in 2019, we brought it to Boston. And for the first few years, we focused on classroom teachers, mostly K through 12, but majority middle and high. Sometimes we let in people from higher education, but we realized that we weren't the best fit for them. And we welcomed museum professionals. And then in 2019, folks from the National Park Service sort of kicked our door open. And then that work expanded, and we created many Upstander academies just for them. And last summer, we got a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and our 6-day Upstander Academy became a 13-day journey of learning and unlearning, mostly about the indigenous origins of the place we call home. And this summer, the week after next, we're doing a faith and land-based Upstander Academy with faith leaders in Eastern Massachusetts, because many of them in their parishes and in their congregations hundreds of years ago, there were individuals who were enslavers and architects of genocidal laws that terrorized the original peoples of this land. And they're trying to figure out their place in this story. So we've created an Upstander Academy for them.
Adam, anything further? I wanted to ask you a question about Dawnland. We've talked a lot about the education background and so forth, but I think our viewers would be interested to know a little bit of the hard work that went into getting the information that made its way into the film. And here I'm thinking about the footage that was from the Senate hearing, the U.S. Senate hearing on what became the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is a major focal point of the film. And I have this recollection years ago that we all collectively read the legislative history of the Indian Child Welfare Act in the hearings. And one of you, I know it wasn't me, because I don't read this carefully, but one of you read in the transcript, there was a question from Senator, what was his name?
Senator Aberask.
Jim Aberas asked one of the people giving testimony whether or not the lights were too bright. And at that moment, it's like, this is recognition. This is being filmed. It's not just an audio recording. There's some footage out there. Could you share with folks just the extent of the efforts that it took to find this footage, and how you both have your beautiful Emmys standing behind you there, and I suspect that was a major contribution to Dawnland getting an Emmy Award, was the finding of this valuable footage. Tell us that story.
Yeah, sure. And Laura, I don't know if it's too late to bring Ben back in here, because he was integral to this as well, and it's a piece of the story that he could share. Ben, can I put you on, and we were just watching the footage there.
Oh yeah.
Right there. Ben, can I put you on the spot, and I'll jump in with the rest?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember there was a phase in the filmmaking process where we were kind of stuck, and the editing process of Dawnland, and we decided to take a step back and stop editing, and the entire team in the edit. So Mishy, Adam, me, and our wonderful editor Kristen Salerno did this thing we called Dawnland Camp. And we read all of the statements, hundreds of statements that were given to the TRC, just big giant binders, and we read the entirety of the sort of legislative report from 1974. And somewhere in there, I remember reading Senator Abrask asking, "Are the lights too bright for you?" And I find that curious because I think Adam. Oh, those are your binders from Dawnland Camp. Yeah.
These are all the statements. Sorry, Ben.
And I find that curious because, Adam, you had talked to Senator Abrask on the phone, I believe, and asked him, had that been documented? He said, no, there weren't cameras there. And you had talked to one of the attorneys, and I think one of the people even that had given testimony, and they'd all said, sorry, like, we don't think it was filmed. And so that was sort of an impetus to be like, Adam, can you look a little bit harder for this? Can you make some more calls?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Mishy.
Well, we decided to shift from the national networks to the local stations. We were about to give up, and that was the one stone we hadn't turned over, and that was the bingo.
This predates C-SPAN. This is before there were cameras.
And so that young man with the tie there that you see walking up to the table, that's Bert Hirsch. With that, and I spoke to him. And he also, by the way, appears in a brilliant Radiolab episode about Indian Child Welfare and about the Indian Child Welfare Act, talking about all of this. And I remember this, amazing quote that he had that about everybody thought it was their own personal tragedy. Nobody understood that this was happening all over the place. And he said there were no cameras, and there he is in the footage. And thank you, Mishy and Ben, for pushing me. They said, could you just keep looking one more time, look somewhere. And so I found I went through all of the sort of anybody who's a documentary archival producer kind of knows where to look. And I didn't know a ton about this at the time, but I was emailing different people about where are the different places that we can look. And they said, NBC, ABC, all of the kind of broadcast networks. And I found something in the NBC archives, and all it said, you can't just watch it because this is film in cans that had not been processed. We didn't know exactly what we would be looking for, but it just said Indian health hearings, and it had the date. And we knew the date of the hearings because Ben had read the transcripts, and I said, well, this is on the right date, and it says Indian health hearings. And I remember we had to pay, I think it was like $500, just not to license the footage, but just to see what it was. Much, much more than that to actually license the footage. And I'll never forget when they sent me that screener link. I was expecting, it's TV news, it's going to be 90 seconds of footage or something. There won't be any sound, or it'll just be like one sound bite, or it won't be it'll be something completely different. And I hit play, and I saw my jaw just dropped because it's, as you see, it was just incredibly moving, painful testimony in living color with amazing sound. And they didn't stop rolling like TV, like TV news nowadays. Like once the soundbite is over, sometimes they just stop rolling. And I remember sending it to Ben and Kristen Salerno, our editor, and Kristen, I think, almost immediately replying, "This is better than Christmas. Oh my God, this is amazing." And it was just incredible to see, these statements that Ben had thought, well, maybe we could reenact them somehow, and here they were from the people who experienced them. So, much credit to you all for pushing me to work harder when I'm often inclined to say, we're not going to find it. So thank you.
It wanted to be found. It wasn't us. It's just the voices wanted to be heard.
Well, I think it's a tremendous contribution, and I think helped frame the film in such beautiful and powerful ways. I know when I show Dawnland to my students, they so appreciate seeing the footage from the actual hearing that led to the passage of the law. Um, from Dawnland, there was another film that you all worked on called Bounty, and I wondered if folks can say a few words about that, lessons learned and applied in the making of Bounty. I'll turn it over to Mishy if you'd like to kick that off.
Sure, Bruce. Thank you so much. So I wish I knew the day when Adam and Ben returned from one of their journeys to Maine, but I don't know the date. And they brought me an image, and the image was of a law that had been signed, actually in the room that's on the screen right now. That is called the council chamber. Today it's known as the Old State House, but in the 1700s it was the townhouse. And it was where the governors and lieutenant governors and their cabinets used to meet to deliberate and pass laws. And in the case, what they brought me was a law signed in early November of 1755 that encouraged settlers to go forth and hunt, capture, kill, and scalp Wabanaki people, specifically this law, Penobscot people, children, women, and men, for exorbitant amounts of money. And later we learned promises of land. So, just to give you all a sense of how that little thing gestated and turned into the film called Bounty, and a 230 plus teacher's guide and a extensive electronic timeline and a bounty rewards archive that we created with our dear colleague Christine Malpica. When I wrote the Dawnland Teacher's Guide, which has 12 lessons, the final lesson, the 12th, is 8 pages long. And it reflects the limited understanding that I had at the time about the breadth and depth of these scalp laws and their impact on the original peoples of this land and how it spread from the Northeast across the country. I didn't know that. So I wrote 8 pages. Well, Dawnland's out in the world and it's soaring. And we had a conversation, and we had that conversation collaboratively. And this shows how our work shifted with Ambassador Molly and Brian, at the time she was Molly and Dana, Penobscot Nation ambassador, and Don Neptune Adams, who viewers of Dawnland met in that film, and who appears with her child in Bounty. That's Ambassador Dana and her 2 daughters in the slide you're seeing right now, and another Penobscot family. And we, rather than the kind of filmmaking that Adam and Ben described that sort of informed Dawnland in its early days, this was a collaborative process from the beginning. We know this story. We know what happened in this room. Do you want this story to be told? Do you want it to be a film? Do you want us to do research so that we can sort of learn more about all of this? And so the Penobscot families who joined us are the co-directors and co-producers of this 9-minute film. That's Tim and his family, called Bounty. So I think, I don't know if, I guess I'll just say the research into this is ongoing. We have not given up. We're still digging and we're still learning. We know now that there were 80 laws passed in this region that terrorized the native peoples of the the place now called New England. We know that that practice spread south and west all the way to California, and it didn't end until the 1880s. And we know that captives, including children and human remains, were brought all the way from present-day Maine to Boston, to the building that you see on your screen right now, the old State House, where they were these human remains and body parts were placed into tar barrels and incinerated, and some of them buried nearby. And this is not taught. And this is why Upstander Project, one of the reasons why we exist, because we're indignant over the fact that this history is not known. Bounty's been out since 2021. We're very pleased to say that in a couple of weeks, it will be viewable to visitors of the old State House in the Black Box Theater next to the council chamber. It's taken a lot of work to get us to this moment. And that's an important step forward. But this history needs to be integral to the teaching of the history of this land, and it's not. The teachers who come to the Upstander Academy every summer, they know this history. They teach it, but it needs to be broader.
And Mishy, I'll just add the apologies if you said this and I missed it while I was running slides, but to me the major reason this history lives is because of the Penobscot people, because they posted it on the walls of Penobscot Nation offices. They teach it to their children. They've always known this history, even if most of us settlers haven't known it, and even if it took us saying, "Hey, what about making this film that we felt like we had to make?" Because I remember those conversations where we had Mishy, where I think you were saying, "Well, we got to get this into Dawnland. How, like, it's part of the story," and we couldn't figure out a way to do it. We couldn't figure out a way to make it make sense in Dawnland. And we agreed that we've got to tell this story. And as soon as we kind of had a moment, we connected with Molly and Dawn and said, we think the story needs to be told. Would you like to do it with us? Do you think that this approach makes sense? And we think children should be part of it, because I was already thinking about, my eldest, now 9 years old, and wanting him to be able to take in this history, and wanting everybody to learn this history, and wanting to be able to say to teachers and to everybody, what Don Neptune Adams says in one of the videos about this film. If our children were old enough to experience these horrors, then your children are old enough to learn about it.
Yes, exactly. And our beloved colleague Roger Paul Skeege put in the chat, even the children were told this history. And that's absolutely right. And we have evidence that Native peoples in the 1800s knew this history. And then it was erased. And the fact that in a place, like Massachusetts, with all of our so-called progressive values, this history is largely unknown is just utterly unacceptable.
If I can add to that, Mishy, you made this point earlier. One of you did. It's not just that it's unknowable. We're living now at a time where it's being legislated out of existence, or at least causing teachers to second guess what they can and cannot bring to the attention of students, for fear that it might cost them their license if they're breaching the law.
Yes.
I'm glad that the New Hampshire law was recently rejected by the courts as unconstitutional. The so-called divisive concepts law. We've got just a few minutes before we'll take a few questions from our viewers, but I wanted to see if there's one last question for you two, which is about the filmmaking process. And you see the slide there. Things that you recall, close calls, things that you remember that things could have really gone south in a hurry. What stands out? What is this? What are we looking at on this slide here, for example?
Yeah, this is the aforementioned old jalopy that I think we promised you all in the slick promotional materials for this event. Think about zip ties and dad jokes, and here's where the zip ties come in. You can see this is the car that we drove. I think about 50,000 miles over the course of about 18 months, and yes, that is Ben on top of the car. Um, and I wish it wasn't a graveyard in the background, but it was too good of a shot to pass up at the time. And that duct tape or that gaff tape that you see on that back passenger door, that was Ben and I knew that you could not open that door, but we were often giving people rides or having other people get in the car, and if we opened that door literally might fall off. So that's why we put that tape there to discourage people from opening the door, and there were actual zip ties holding the bumper on there. And yes, that side mirror is mismatched color to the rest of the car because that got knocked off at one point. And the other it's it's funny and cute, but I think the other important lesson that there was um, I like to tell dad jokes even before I was a dad, so that tells you something about me that's probably not particularly flattering. and and I think what I learned along the way was, there are a lot of different kinds, and that a good dad joke can support good filmmaking. And I think the way that I learned to do that is make myself the butt of the joke. If I make myself the butt of the joke, that's cool. That's endearing. That's a way that you can connect with people. And when you make others the butt of the joke, it's a completely different story. It's a completely different dynamic and story. And so I cannot share this in a public space, but I will allude to the story, and those who are interested can follow up with me. But I also needed to allow myself to be the butt of the joke, not just in my own telling, but others telling. And so there was a pretty infamous moment where an elder in the community made a joke about me to a room full of people, a very dirty joke, which I'm not going to repeat here, but those who really want to know it can follow up. And that was a great learning moment for me, because there was the initial moment of embarrassment, and then afterwards there were some people that came up to me and said, that means that you're welcome here. That she's doing that in front of all the people. It's a sign of welcome and endearment. Um, uh, so I appreciated that moments like those, and I appreciated moments where we uh, got ourselves into some pickles, like um, the time where we accidentally we did an interview with Sandy Whitehawk, and Ben has this trick for how to make sure that the room is quiet during interviews, and often it means turning off the refrigerator, because the refrigerators can be noisy. And so she was in this tall hotel, and we loaded out all this gear, and we get to the car, and we had this rule. The rule was Ben always has the keys, because anytime we broke that rule, something bad would happen. There's one time that I literally had to crawl through the trunk of the car to open up the car, because we had locked the keys in the car. And with Sandy, we realized after we loaded all the gear out and got down from the elevator that we did not have keys to the car, because we left the keys in the fridge, to remind ourselves to turn the fridge back on when we left. So went back up, turned the fridge back on, got the keys. But maybe that's enough rambling. And Mishy, I don't know if you have any other stories that you want to share.
Well, I'll just say that as we were releasing Bounty, there were a flurry of, we had an op-ed that we co-penned with Ambassador Molly and Dana at the time, and Don Neptune Adams in the Globe. And then there were some articles in the Globe that I remember made me very angry, and I wrote a letter to the Globe because I remember Murray White has come a long way at the Globe, but there were things that he said that just kept putting Wabanaki people in the past tense, and I was incensed. And I sent off this letter, and unbeknownst, to any of us, someone read the letter and wrote us a check for $10,000 because they were deeply moved by the letter, and that contribution turned into something much more substantial over time. So that there were a lot of moments like that that lifted us up, as we felt as though this work is the work of centuries. And I think, that as a meta reflection, I'll just say that it didn't take, I mean, the settler colonial society that we live in, it's taken hundreds of years to establish. And our work chipping away at it, we've done more than a drop in the bucket, but there are many lifetimes of work that lie ahead until we can shift the narrative that predominates in this country, and in this region where people think we are so open minded. I see that there's a question. Are you wanting us to shift to the questions now, Bruce?
Yes, yes. Let's turn. There's a couple of questions that have been posed. One is to you,
Mm-hmm.
Mishy, is to ask about the influence on your learnings and the dog guidelines. How have that influenced academic filmmaking curricula?
Hmm.
Oh, Nishi, should I jump in on that one?
Sure.
Um, so thank you, Jeffrey, for the question. And I think I see that Natalie Bullock Brown is in the audience here. And I think if we had the ability to bring you on right now, Natalie, we would, but I don't think that we have that ability. This platform is not quite fancy enough to just pull people in from the audience. So Natalie, I hope you'll share links or resources for folks about the documentary accountability working group. And I'm sure you know more about this than I do, as its director, about all the ways that dog is influencing the field really tremendously in practice amongst filmmakers and and certainly uh, in the classroom as well. So many filmmakers in the documentary world are also professors, and so I know that these practices are making their way into college curricula and into practice amongst many filmmakers. And I know at the same time it's an uphill battle. There's a lot of indie filmmakers who are embracing these things, and there's a lot of um, folks that more of the more reality TV bent kind of stuff that you're seeing a lot of on Netflix and other places, where the folks are not really incentivized to practice rebalancing power dynamics and accountability to participants and staying engaged with participants along the way. So a lot of work to do. And Natalie, I hope you'll share more with folks, and we're happy to share that out to folks as well. Yeah.
So, should I take the question that was for me, Bruce?
Yes, please. Do you have that? Do you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Um, I'll try to make a long story shorter.
Would you share what the question is for the audience?
Yes. I think folks can see in the chat, how did I enter the equation initially, and why have I dedicated my life to this work? Um, so I spent 12 years of my adult life in Latin America. I was very fortunate to go to Chile soon after the election of a man named Salvador Allende, a medical doctor who had run for president a number of times and was finally elected in late 1970. And for people who don't know anything about Salvador Allende, I've tried to come up with um, an image that might be somewhat telling for you. And it's, if Dolores Huerta and Congressman John Lewis had had a child who they raised in their image, it might have been someone like Salvador Allende. Um, soon after Allende's election, Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon set out to undermine and destroy his presidency. And it was a period of time of enormous popular upheaval, creativity, and the unquenchable thirst for justice that had been brewing in Chile for centuries was finally let loose. And this culminated in a coup d'etat, military takeover, on September 11th, 1973. I lived there then, and I don't say lightly that I survived the coup. There could have been a different outcome for me. And certainly there was a very different outcome for my boyfriend, for many of the people with whom I worked, and for other people from the US who were there. Chile was a magnet for young progressive people who were looking for a different model for society. And many of us felt that we found it there for a period of time. So after my time in Chile, and once I left there and returned to the States for a period of time and did human rights education and a lot of public speaking and finished my undergraduate degree, I got a Fulbright scholarship and went to Ecuador, where I lived for 10 years. Ecuador is a country with a massive indigenous population. And after my Fulbright research project and getting a master's degree, I had the great fortune of working at an Ecuadorian NGO for 7 years, mostly with indigenous peoples from the highlands, doing work that's not that different in some ways from the work I do now. Film was not part of it, but helping to design and facilitate deep learning programs was. And there came a point for me when I realized that I knew more about the history of the Quechua people in the highlands of Ecuador than I knew about my own background and about the indigenous peoples of the Algonquin-speaking family groups in the region where I'd lived. And some of that pushed me back to the States, as well as a personal tragedy in my life. When I went to Chile, there was a burning question that pushed me. And that was, why do so many people in the world hate my country? I think I learned the answer by living in Chile and in Ecuador and coming back here to deepen my understanding about the origins of this place that we call home. So what keeps me in this work, what motivates me? It's my deep commitment to justice and wanting to taste the beloved community, even if it's for fleeting moments, and to contribute to it through my craft, which is that of an educator. And I love teaching teachers and their students. That's what profoundly moves me. And doing this work with Adam and turning Upstander Project from something very tiny that was just the two of us into an organization that we hope will last for another 15 years. And after that, is, for me, it's a vehicle for showing up amidst the indifference, which is so it's so dangerous and perilous as unaccountable raw power tries to destabilize whatever threads of democracy we still have here. So to that, I devote myself, and that's why I'm in this work. I hope I've answered that question a bit.
We sure did. Thanks so much, Mishy. That was beautiful. Adam, I'm turning it over to you to wrap things up with the audience.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. And don't go anywhere because now is the time where I get to ask you to support Upstander Project. But wait, there's also a fun game we're going to play after this. And thank you to Bruce and Mishy. We are getting used to this new platform, and so that's why they disappeared so quickly. And I want to make sure, I failed to mention in the beginning, so I want to make sure that I give a huge thanks to the Mass Center for Native American Awareness and to UMass Boston's Institute for New England Native American Studies for co-sponsoring tonight's event. Thank you. Thanks to everybody there, Cedric Woods, Claudia Foxtree, and so many others at both those organizations. We appreciate the support and your partnership for so many years. And now's the part where I thank you all for joining us. And I know so many of you donated when you registered for this event. Thank you for your engagement and continued financial support. You can donate, watch our films, and learn more about our work on our website, which we encourage you to check out. And you can scan that QR code that's on the screen.